Good evening, everybody. It's very nice to see you all. Thank you so much for being here, braving the rain after a few days of sunshine. I know it's tough coming out, but it's so nice to see everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Danny Hoffman. I'm the director of the Henry M. Jackson School of International Studies here at the University of Washington. It's a real pleasure for me to be able to welcome all of you here tonight. We're very honored to be able to host Dr. Narushige Michishita of the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies in Tokyo this evening for his talk, Japan's New Security Strategy, Outlook and Challenges. We're also very honored. We have some special guests with us tonight. Mr. Nobuaki Aida, counselor from the Cabinet Office of the Prime Minister's Secretariat for the Government Public Relations Office, and Ambassador Michael Mishlak, Senior Vice President of U.S. ASEAN Business Council and the former U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam. So thank you all for joining us. We're honored to have you here. And again, thanks to you all. Now, in the Jackson School, we begin all of our public events by recognizing that the school is situated on Coast Salish territory, the traditional homelands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, Muckleshoot, and other indigenous peoples. The Jackson School understands that the international community includes sovereign American Indian tribes, First Nations, and indigenous peoples across the world. Now, I'm sure most of you will know this already, but the Jackson School and indeed the University of Washington have a very long and important relationship with Japan and with Japanese studies. This relationship dates back to 1909 when the university first established what was then named the Department of Oriental Studies. Now, over the years, we've built a program that serves as a model on this campus for what engaged area studies can be. We have experts in language, culture, history, politics, and the arts who serve as a vital resource for students on this campus and community members. Students on this campus and communities around the world. For some of our students and our community members, Japan Studies at the UW will be their first meaningful introduction to Japan and Japan Studies. For others, we will be a resource as they develop policy and pursue academic studies at the highest levels. We're very proud of that tradition. And as the director of the school, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you tonight yet another example of the important programming that Japan Studies continues to bring to the UW campus. Now, as many of you know, Japan Studies is one of a constellation of strong centers and programs in our school that makes us an internationally recognized leader in advancing the understanding of and engagement in world issues. With 7 undergraduate majors, 17 minors, and 11 graduate degree programs, we're one of the oldest and the largest schools in the country offering degrees in international and area studies. We remain committed to furthering global understanding of the issues that impact nations, communities, educators, and individuals. So again, I want to thank all of you for being with us, and I invite you to continue to engage with the Jackson School and to support Japan Studies at the University of Washington. So now, I hope you will please join me in welcoming Dr. Marie Ansherdogi, chair of both the UW and the Jackson School of Japan Studies programs. Marie specializes in the political economy of Japan, and her research focuses primarily on the key institutions and policies of Japan's capitalist system. So Marie, welcome.
Thank you, Danny, and greetings to all of you. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces out there, and I really appreciate you joining us tonight for this very special occasion. The changing landscape of military and economic security policies in Japan is not only of great interest to those of us in Japan Studies, but it is of vital importance to the world. In fact, these changes are historic. So it is my great pleasure to introduce one of the preeminent experts on Japan's security policies, Dr. Narushige Michishita, professor and executive vice president of the National Graduate Institute of Policy Studies in Japan, and also global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. Dr. Michishita earned master's and doctorate degrees in international relations at the Paul Nietzsche School of International Studies at Johns Hopkins University. He has served as senior research fellow at the National Institute of Defense Studies at Japan's Defense Ministry, and as assistant counselor, Cabinet Secretariat for Security and Crisis Management in the Japanese government. He's fluent in Korean and English and has written extensively on the nuanced relationships among nations in East Asia, particularly in regards to Japan-Korea relations, with a focus on the challenges posed by the threat of nuclear weapons, on crisis negotiations, and efforts to maintain a peaceful and stable Asia-Pacific at a time of turbulent change in the world order. His book, North Korea's Military Diplomatic Campaigns, 1966 to 2008, won the Best Book Award from the Japan Association for International Security and is available not just in Japanese, but Korean and English. And he is co-author of a Woodrow Wilson book titled Lessons of the Cold War in the Pacific, U.S. Maritime Strategy, Crisis Prevention, and Japan's Role. Please join me in welcoming Professor Narushige Michishita to the University of Washington and the Japan Studies program.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Professor Anchodogi, and thank you everyone for coming. My name is Narushige Michishita. Today's topic is Japan's new security strategy, outlook and challenges. But before we get into the subject, let me briefly introduce my school and myself. So I teach international security affairs at this school named the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies. We call it GRIPS, GRIPS. It's a good name for a school because it sounds strong in English, and it means brain in German. But when I said this, one of my French-speaking friends raised his hand and said, "Oh, grips in French means influenza." So we stick to German. We have, this is a graduate school, only school. We have MA students and PhD students. We have about 360 students, of whom 2/3 of them are from overseas. So this is we have a highly international environment, but unfortunately there are only 3 students from the US. We need more. We are sitting, so this is our school, and this is a National Arts Center, and this is actually US Army Hardy Barracks. So we are sitting next to this US Hardy Barracks. So when American president come to Japan, they fly out of this helipad you can see there, here, right? So it's an interesting place to teach international security issues. And we teach different, so this is what our faculty members and the students look like, and we teach national security affairs, international relations, public policy, international development, and economics and other things. So if you are interested in studying about security international relations in the Indo-Pacific region, you have to apply, for UW and GRIPS at the same time. And if you are admitted to both of them, you have a hard choice to make, right? And so my recommendation is, if you like crab cake, pick UW. If you like sushi, pick GRIPS. All right, about myself. So as Professor Anchodogi said, I have written this book on North Korea. This is about the history of North Korea's brinkmanship diplomacy. North Korea's, so I published this book in 2009, but so it's been a while since then. But so in the meantime, North Korea's, the explosion yield of North Korea's nuclear weapons have increased. The range of North Korea's missiles have extended, but the logic, the name of the game that they are playing remains the same. So if you are interested, please take a look. And if you read Korean, there is a Korean version too. And I'm currently writing a book on the Cold War military strategies in the Pacific in the 1980s, taking a look at what the US, the Soviet Union, and Japan were doing. This monograph is an offspring of my book project and is available on the website. So if you are interested, please take a look. And the interesting thing is there are a lot of similarities between what the Soviet Union was doing back then and what China is doing right now, and what between what Japan and the US were doing back then and what we are doing today. All right, in this session today, I will answer 3 questions. The first question is, what's new in Japan's new security strategy? The second question is, what are the important things that Japan is doing to achieve its objectives? And third question is, what are the major challenges that Japan faces in implementing the new security strategy? Okay, the first question, what's new in Japan's new security strategy? What's new is that Japan is now committed to the defense of Taiwan. In other words, Japan has decided to acquire necessary capabilities so that it can fight for the defense of Taiwan if a war breaks out across the Taiwan Strait. Certainly, we don't want to go to war with China, so the best case scenario is something in which we prepare for war that deters China from going to the war in the first place, and China eventually decides to abandon forcible means of unifying the Chinese nation eventually. There is one thing that we have to understand here, that is the role of the US-Japan alliance. Many people actually think that the US-Japan alliance is there to defend Japan. Well, there is a truth to it, but the most important objectives of the alliance is actually the defense of South Korea and the defense of Taiwan. So if you take a look at the history, you understand what I'm talking about. So during the Cold War, the US-Japan alliance was there to help the US, United States, to compete with the Soviet Union. And the US was planning to undertake a major offensive operations in the Far East in order to kind of pin down Soviet forces in the Far East and the Pacific theater, because during the Cold War, the center of gravity, the most important theater of operations was in Europe, Central Front, right? So the US and Japan, this alliance was trying to help Europeans or deter the Soviet Union from attacking Europe. And in order to assist or fight this potential war against the Soviet Union, the United States and Japan formulated combined operation plans or war plans, codenamed OPLAN 5051 and OPLAN 5053. And when you take a look at the military operations or the level of commitment different countries and alliances make, you have to take a look at the operation plans, because unless you have operation plans, you will not be able to fight war, big wars effectively. And so there are 2 things that it takes: all plans, operation plans, and exercises. You cannot do what you don't exercise, right? So if you take a look at those things, you can understand how serious the countries are to certain contingencies. After the end of the Cold War, the alliance, the US-Japan alliance, became more focused on Korea. During the 1990s, Japan decided to have its armed forces, called Self-Defense Forces, or SDF, assist the US forces fighting for South Korea in Korean contingencies. Although the Japanese self-defense forces' roles were limited to non-combat missions at that point, it was a significant strategic decision for Japan. In Korean contingencies, Japan would be providing main operating bases. So in Korean contingency or in Taiwan contingencies, Japan will be playing two important roles. One is to provide major operating bases in Japan for the US forces and provide military logistic support to the US forces fighting for South Korea or for Taiwan. And just to make sure that you understand how important those bases are. So there are major Air Force base. What kind of US bases are there in Japan? Sorry, this is in Japanese. So there is a big Air Force base in Misawa. There is another Air Force base in Yokota near Tokyo. And there is a big naval base for 7th Fleet in Yokosuka. And there is a Navy air base in Atsugi. And there is a Marine Air Force base in Iwakuni. And there is another naval base in Sasebo. And there are two major bases, one Marine Air Station in Futenma, and the other a big, huge Air Force base in Kadena on the island of Okinawa. So the US forces, these bases would be indispensable for the US forces to conduct military operations on the Korean Peninsula or across the Taiwan Strait. To make it possible for the US and the Japanese forces to operate effectively together in Korean contingencies, the two countries, Japan, the US and Japan, formulated the new operation plan, right? Combined Operation Plan, or Plan 5055. So that indicates how committed we are to the defense of South Korea. And so these are what the Japanese forces be doing. And there was another turning point in 2015 when the Japanese parliament enacted a set of laws to make it possible for Japan to start, to start exercising the right of collective self-defense. It's a technical term, collective self-defense. What does it mean? That means Japan could now commit its self-defense forces to not only non-combat operations, but also combat operations in the defense of South Korea. So Japan's commitment to the defense of South Korea became more robust as a result. Finally, in 2022, last year, the US and Japan decided to add one more mission to their alliance's portfolio, the defense of Taiwan. As a result, the US-Japan alliance is now committed to the defense of South Korea and Taiwan, and at the same time. And Japan's decision to almost double the defense budget makes sense because now the alliance takes care of two theaters of operations, the Korean Peninsula and the Taiwan Strait, instead of one. Now let's turn to the second question. What is Japan doing in order to achieve those objectives? So there are three things that Japan is doing. One is to strengthen its own defense capabilities. Two, strengthen the US-Japan alliance. Three, increase or expand the security cooperation network in the Indo-Pacific region. So let's take a look at the first one. The Japanese government recently have decided to increase the defense budget by about 60%, 60, in the next 5 years. And currently, if you take a look at this, the US is the largest spender on defense with its defense spending of $877 billion last year, followed by China with its defense spending of $292 billion. And Japan was in the 10th place with its defense spending of $46 billion. if we increase the defense budget by about 60%, we will be spending more or less like the United Kingdom, which spends like $68.5 billion right now. So that's going to be a big change. And with that increased spending, so Japan will be spending a lot of money in 3 areas. One is standoff strike capabilities, 2, cross-domain operation capabilities, and 3, sustainability and resilience. What does it mean? So Japan will be introducing, for example, in terms of strike capabilities, introducing Tomahawk missiles, sea-based Tomahawk missiles. We will be buying them from the US. We are already acquiring Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range. That's a long name. We call it JASSM, J-A-S-S-M-E-R, Extended Range. And these missiles will be equipped with F-15 fighters that we have. And we are acquiring a Joint Strike Missile, or JSM, to be fitted with F-35 fighter aircraft, stealth 5th generation stealth aircraft. And we are acquiring and developing indigenously produced Type 12 surface-to-ship missiles. And also, the second thing that we are doing is to take a look at the cross-domain operation capabilities, right? What does it mean? When you say, so we are talking about 3 new domains in which we fight wars. One is cyberspace, 2, outer space, space, and the 3, electromagnetic field. So traditionally, we are talking about 3-dimensional war, land, air, and sea. But now we are talking about 6-dimensional war, talking about land, sea, air, outer space, cyberspace, and electromagnetic field. So we will be investing a lot of money and kind of hiring new people in order to take care of operations in those new domains. And also Japan is acquiring a large number, or spending a lot of money in order to enhance sustainability and resilience, which means basically readiness, enhancing our readiness of our armed forces. When we talk about it, we are trying to increase the amount of poles, petroleum, oil, and lubricants that we have that is necessary to operate our forces. And we are acquiring a large amount of ammunition, missiles, and other things. And those are what we are doing in order to enhance our readiness. And also, another thing that we are doing is Japan is deploying a larger number of forces, especially army units equipped with anti-ship missiles in these islands. We call them Southwestern Islands or Ryukyu Islands. And these islands are, so here is Okinawa, where is Okinawa? So this is Okinawa here. It's a big island. And there are smaller islands lying between Okinawa and Taiwan. And so these islands are really sitting close to the area of operations. So we are deploying new units in order to strengthen our defense posture in those areas. And the self-defense forces are conducting exercises in order to make it possible for them to rapidly deploy their forces to those islands lying between Taiwan and Okinawa in case of contingencies. So that's the first pillar of our strategy. What's the second pillar? Second pillar is the strengthening of the US-Japan alliance. We work together, we operate together closely, and currently, so I talked about Operation Plan 5055 for Korean contingencies, right? If we are serious, we need another O-plan for Taiwan contingencies, and we are reportedly, it's a highly secret, so I can't see it, but supposedly and reportedly, the two countries are formulating a new operation plan, and I guess I have my guess on the code name, because so far we have O-plan 5051, 5053, 5055, but I don't say it. Why? Because if I say it, I'm right, people say, why are you leaking our secret, right? Defense people will hate me. If I'm wrong, people think I'm stupid, right? So either way, I'm doomed, so I just don't say. Anyway, so that's what we are doing, and the two armed forces are exercising very closely together in order to enhance their combined operational capabilities. So this is a sort of big picture of what will happen if there is a war across the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. strike forces will be kind of coming to this theater, but then they need some protection. So Japanese forces will be taking care of Chinese submarines, conducting anti-submarine warfare operations, anti-air warfare operations, anti-missile, ballistic missile, as well as cruise missile operations in order to protect these U.S. strike forces. And so definitely, I mean, the idea is if there is a contingency across the Taiwan Strait, the U.S. forces and the Japanese forces will be fighting together for the defense of Taiwan. And the third big pillar of Japan's new strategy, is to enhance our security cooperation with countries in the Indo-Pacific region. When we talk about this, which countries are we talking about? We talk about Australia, we talk about India, we talk about Korea. Why are they important? We talk about Quad. When we say Quad, it means includes the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India, and certainly South Korea is important. Why are they important? If you take a look at this, it's easy to understand. Where is India? India is now the fourth largest spender on defense in the world, with its defense spending of 81.4%, up $4 billion. With its defense spending increasing by 47% in the past 10 years. South Korea is in the 9th place. It was, actually in 2022, for the first time in history, South Korea overtook Japan in terms of defense expenditure. And South Korea spent $46.4 billion, and with its defense spending increasing by 37% in the past decade. And Australia was in the 13th place, which is impressive given its population of 24 million, with its defense spending of $32.3 billion, with its defense spending increasing by 47% in the past 10 years. Oh, by the way, we have to understand how much the trend, I failed to say it, so I say it now. In the past 10 years, the U.S. defense spending increased by just 2.7%, right? While the Chinese military spending increased by massive 63%. So, and the Japanese one increased by 18%. So if you do the math, you can understand even if Japan and the US work together, we might not be able to compete with China forever. But so we need other partners like India, South Korea, and Australia in order to maintain the balance of power in this region. So that's our calculation. Okay, so finally, the third question, what are the challenges? We are doing a lot to enhance our defense capabilities, but there are challenges. What are they? There are at least two major challenges. One is the question of whether the US and Japan could remain committed to the defense of South Korea or defense of Taiwan in case of war, because we expect that in case of war, North Korea and or China would do their best to prevent the US and Japan from intervening or helping South Korea or Taiwan by military coercion. And for that, North Korea has this medium-range ballistic missile named NOV, and North Korea has deployed more than 300 of them. And this is capable of hitting targets in most part of Japan. China has, impressive, 1,000 medium-range ballistic missiles capable of reaching Japan. So with these capabilities, China can do this. And some of the short-range ballistic missiles can reach Okinawa because Okinawa is sitting close to the Chinese east coast. So what we expect is that North Korea or, for example, China would definitely say, well, if there is a war, if they decide to attack Taiwan, China would say, we like Japan, we are not interested in attacking you, but if you dare to interfere with our internal affairs, which is Taiwan, we would be forced to attack you. Would you be interested, would you be willing to sacrifice Tokyo for Taipei? That would be the question. And Japan would be put in a very difficult position. There is another challenge. This is maybe we backtrack. As I said, the US-Japan alliance takes care of 2 theaters operations instead of 1 now. So there are 2 theaters, there is only 1 alliance. So this 1 alliance have to take care of 2 theaters operations. And so if I were a Chinese military planner, if I decide to attack Taiwan, I would definitely try to create a crisis on the Korean Peninsula in order to pin down US and Japanese forces to the north, right? That would make my life very easy, right? And this is a kind of pessimistic scenario, but China going forward, might decide to help North Korea militarily in order to make it easy for them to, their strategic calculation in Taiwan contingencies. And without China doing the job, now, unfortunately, Russia has already started to help North Korea in return for North Korea's contribution to the war in Ukraine. So this is really a serious challenges that we face today. So there are challenges, but we are working hard to maintain the peace across the Taiwan Strait and on the Korean Peninsula. And some, Chinese specialists and people think that, they don't like what we are doing. But I always tell them that it's actually what we are doing is in the Chinese interest as well as ours. Why? Because, not many people I think most of the people in China would not like to see the war, breaking out across the Taiwan Strait. But, some Chinese leaders, elites, might decide to take such a venture. And if we are to prevent them from taking such a venture as Mr. Putin did in Ukraine, that would be a win-win for both Japan and the US and China. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your insightful and somewhat provocative comments. I'm sure we're going to have people writing out questions on their cards. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce this evening's discussant, my colleague at the Jackson School of International Studies, Professor Sadia Pekkanen, who is Job and Gertrude Tamaki Endowed Professor. She's also founding co-director of the UW Space Policy and Research Center and founding director of the QUAL program, a university-wide program launched in response to the need for qualitative and policy-relevant data analysis in universities, the private sector, and government. Dr. Pekkanen earned master's degrees from Columbia University and also Yale Law School, along with her PhD in political science from Harvard. Her research and teaching are at the intersection of international relations and international law, specializing in the commercial, legal, and security policies shaping outer space affairs. Please welcome Professor Pekkanen to the podium.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much, Marie, and thank you so much, Professor Michishita, if I may call you Michi, for joining us and giving us your great overview about Japan's new security strategy, about Japan's intentions, its push for new capabilities, as well as the challenges Japan faces in executing these strategies. I share also your sentiments about working as hard as possible to avoid war, and part of my remarks that will follow in the context of the US-Japan alliance, as well as the security partnerships that Japan is working on, will speak particularly to that theme. And I'm really looking forward to the questions and conversations with our audience. What I thought I would do is to offer a few of my own reflections that draw in and engage actually Michi's earlier works, our simultaneous works, not just on military strategy, but also on grand strategy. And how does what you have just laid out for us sort of fit into the broader intellectual architecture that guides Japan's leadership today? What, in other words, is Japan's grand strategy in this very changed international order? I say changed because Japan's foremost ally, the United States, has certainly marked geopolitics with a return to great power competition. And for the United States, this means a bipolar contest in which the US military leadership has prioritized China, which it calls its #1 pacing challenge. And what you have laid out for us today are some responses or some strategies that attempt to deal with the kinds of challenges that the alliance is facing. Now, these kinds of official US views are especially important at a time when the center of gravity in international relations has shifted to Asia. As the US asserts, the region comprising China, Japan, India, Korea, and Southeast Asian countries, among others, is also home to more than half the world's people, about 2/3 of the world's economy, 7 of the world's largest militaries. I think you got some sense of what that looks like, and has more US military members than in any other region outside the United States. This region is certainly important to the United States, but it is also the region in which Japan lives. So the matter is not abstract for Japan in a region where it faces nuclear and ballistic missile threats from its neighbors, and where today, as countries stock up on their short to intermediate range missile systems, security dynamics, including nuclear escalation, are fraught with danger. The threats are clear, very present for Japan, leading to the issue of Japan's grand strategies. And there are clues to what that might be from Japan's leadership. In a speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue in June 2022 in Singapore, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida asked, "Can the rule-based international order that we have built through hard work, dialogue, and consensus be upheld and the march of peace and prosperity continue? Or will we return to a lawless world where rules are ignored and broken, where unilateral change is the status quo by force, are unchallenged and accepted, and where the strong coerce the weak militarily or economically?" That, he stated, is a choice we have to make today. To me, these questions really go to the heart of Japan's grand strategy. what Japan is doing and why. We should remember, as Michi pointed out, that Japan is, of course, already one of the world's fourth biggest economy. It's also among the top 10 military spenders. And at present, Japan certainly shares in U.S. understanding of threats in the regional context. But as international relations shifts and as China reshapes especially the regional balance of power and prospects for stability, a picture of Japan's grand strategy is coming into focus. One set of responses from Japan in defense of this rule-based international order has come in the new security strategies about which you heard so very nicely, and which are very closely aligned with U.S. diplomatic postures and positions as well as operational plans that Michi talked about. Now, in a notable departure from its past, Japan in particular has begun to openly single out China and Russia as a threat to its security and the international order. It has expressed its opposition to China's efforts to unilaterally change the status quo in the maritime and air domains, especially surrounding the Senkaku Islands. It has also raised concerns about China's strategic ties with Russia as a challenge to the international order. So it is in this context that what Michi has put on the table about the commitment of the US-Japan alliance to the simultaneous defense of South Korea and Taiwan, with Japan increasing its warfighting capabilities and beefing up its defense budgets, its strike capabilities, the USADEN, irregular warfare capabilities, which is of interest to me, Michi, as you'll appreciate, and of course, operationalizing its right to defend its allies and friends. So Japan is certainly doing all of this. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But what I thought, I was listening to you talk, Michi, and I thought you talked about, six domain operation, six domain war. I thought I'd introduce the seventh domain. And what I would say is that certainly Japan is doing everything that you are saying, but that is not all that Japan is doing. As the grand strategy concept reminds us, the defense of a rule-based international order cannot be based on the military response alone. It is important that we here in the United States get this right as Japan reemerges and reengages with the international system in ways that are really unprecedented for its post-war behaviors, but in ways that are also anchored in its historical experience. I think of grand strategy as all the diverse means by which a state produces prosperity and security for national ends, usually under some guiding intellectual architecture. And much of my thinking here is informed by Michi's own work in economic security linkages that really fuel grand strategy. We were so honored to have you write for our Oxford Handbook of Japanese Politics, in which you focus not just on the competitive political military aspects, but also the collaborative economic developmental aspects of Japan's grand strategy, especially in what the Japanese government calls the free and open Indo-Pacific. So drawing on this thinking, we need to also balance these elements in the way Japan is moving on military security with the United States as its ally, but also striking out on its own for economic security with a range of other partners. So I want to make just two big points in conclusion, and then we can sort of engage in a conversation about some of the themes that you are hearing. I think today we need to cast our eyes beyond just the US-Japan military alliance that draws our attention largely to the complex security dilemmas posed by North Korea and the Taiwan Straits. And here is why. First, it is clear that Japan's leadership is executing an all-fronts grand strategy. Given its deeply developmental and historically realist orientation, Japan is also engaged in proactive positioning to safeguard all its fronts, military security, of course, but also economic security that empowers it. Economic security is consistent with Japan's long-standing and culturally deep-rooted ideas about the economic and industrial foundations that make countries wealthy, strong, and secure in the long run. And without understanding economic risks and opportunities that are forged across borders, it is meaningless to talk about a grand strategy for Japan or any other country for that matter. So we need a balanced and holistic view, again, very much in line with Michi's work on grand strategy. Now, under Prime Minister Kishida, Japan has taken concrete legal and institutional steps to enable economic security. And this means not just strengthening trade links with partner countries, but also focusing on the resiliency of basic infrastructure, innovation and supply chains in critical technologies such as semiconductors. And these are themes that also emerged in the Camp David Trilateral Summit in August 2023 that took place between the US, Japan, and South Korea. Let me give you a few examples. Along with 10 Southeast Asian countries, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia, Japan has also signed the world's largest economic pact with China, RCEP, which is estimated to cover a third of the global population and economy. And as Michi's own work has also told us, and while this remains a work in progress, the Japanese government is not averse to the pursuit of economic opportunities within China's Belt and Road initiatives to the tune of about $26 trillion in infrastructure. That may serve development and also poverty eradication concerns for many stakeholders across Asia. Also of note, I think, and this is fairly recent as with the passage of the Economic Security Act, is the way that Japan has moved very deftly to position itself in the US-China semiconductor friction. It has incentivized companies from Taiwan to the Netherlands, which have begun to set up factories and production in Japan aimed at making Japan a powerful hub for semiconductors, which are extremely important for warfare, among other things. And I think that these are all building blocks for Japan's economic security strategy that should be placed alongside a holistic understanding of its military strategy. And this brings me to the second and really concluding point, and about the fluid nature of international relations. The broad conceptual rubric of grand strategy helps us see and balance all aspects of Japan's strategy for its own security. Japan has historically improvised and adapted in tune with external competition and threats. And what it is doing today is really not very different from what it has really historically done. Today, Japan is as keen as ever to produce prosperity and security in its national interests. What the grand strategy framework also suggests is that linear projections about Japan's alignments and partnerships are complicated in the contested international politics today. And here I want to sound a cautionary note because there is a lot of uncertainty for Japan as it looks out at both China but also the United States. The United States is no longer the uncontested unipolar power, and China has made significant strides and is likely to continue to do so over the next decade. A significant calculus in Japan's grand strategic framework also, of course, concerns the internal political stability and cohesion of its former ally, the United States. How Japan behaves and with whom it aligns tells us something about the homegrown strategies for its own security in the future. When we look across the widest sweep of its actions and activities, it is clear that the United States is a dominant but not the only pole of interest to Japan in the cross-cutting military and economic realities today. China, too, is part of the economic security tapestry. A balanced view, I think, is necessary to see, as Prime Minister Kishida put it, the pragmatic realism diplomacy of Japan in this new era. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.